Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. Perhaps one of the most asked and most debated topics among theologians and seekers of truth is the appearance of the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Serpents are unique creatures, they truly are. The Bible mentions serpents or snakes in various contexts and passages. Throughout history, serpents have been worshipped. There are even religions today that focus on and pray to serpent gods. The Bible mentions serpents on several occasions. Genesis 3:1. Now, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. There is a lot going on with serpents. If you go to the hospital and see a doctor, you will likely encounter a caduceus or the rod of Asclepius. The rod of Asclepius and the caduceus are two distinct symbols with different origins and symbolism, each bearing historical significance in its own right. The rod of Asclepius derives its name and significance from Asclepius, the revered ancient Greek god of healing and medicine. This symbol consists of a single serpent coiled around a staff, representing the concept of healing and the medical arts. In contrast, the caduceus has its origins in Greek mythology and is associated with the god Hermes, or Mercury in Roman mythology. This symbol comprises a staff with two serpents entwined around it, often crowned with wings.
The biblical account of Adam and Eve's encounter with this cunning creature raises numerous questions that have fascinated and perplexed minds for centuries. What did the serpent actually look like? Was it a physical serpent, or did it represent something else entirely? The very mention of the serpent evokes curiosity and invites contemplation into its role and significance in the biblical narrative. As we delve into this intriguing subject, we are confronted with a myriad of inquiries. Was the serpent an earthly creature, or does it possess a deeper spiritual meaning? What is the relationship between the serpent and the devil? Did the serpent truly possess the ability to speak, or was it a metaphorical portrayal of persuasive deception? These questions challenge us to explore the theological dimensions of this enigmatic creature, seeking a deeper understanding of its purpose within the broader narrative of God's plan for humanity. With this sermon, we will look at different interpretations as to the identity of the serpent, and we will leave you to come to your own conclusion as to the appearance of the serpent. Interpretation 1. Nahash, the Shine One. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. The Hebrew word Nahash indeed carries multiple layers of meaning, and when applied to the character in Genesis chapter 3, this complexity can lead to various interpretations. Meaning 1. The literal serpent. The basic and direct interpretation of Nahash is a serpent or snake. This interpretation fits the physical description and behavior in the narrative. It crawls, speaks, and tempts. The Bible doesn't explicitly state whether the serpent could stand or walk prior to its curse, but it seems plausible that it could have moved on four legs like other reptiles. This interpretation seems to align best with Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, which describes the curse imposed on the serpent. If the serpent already slithered, the curse and its comparison to legged creatures in Genesis chapter 3, verse 14 would seem redundant. Therefore, it's reasonable to interpret from Genesis chapter 3, verse 14 that the serpent originally possessed some form of legs. Meaning number 2 of the Hebrew word Nahash, the Shining One. In understanding the role and nature of Nahash in the Genesis narrative, the interpretation of it as the Shining One carries a deep meaning. This reading, based on the root letters that can mean to shine or relate to bronze or brass, opens up new layers of meaning that give the serpent an angelic or divine dimension. This perspective offers a striking contrast to the commonplace depiction of the serpent as a mere snake. In this context, the serpent is not a humble, crawling creature, but a radiant, impressive entity, potentially a supernatural presence linked with divine wisdom, albeit associated with a deceptive light. Such an interpretation places the Nahash as a pivotal force in the narrative, a striking figure whose impact on the plot and its characters is as profound as it is cataclysmic. These interpretations take on a richer hue when read in conjunction with other biblical texts. In Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 13 through 15, for instance, there is a description of a magnificent, perfect being present in the Garden of Eden. This figure, decked with precious stones and created as a cherub, is described as blameless until iniquity was found in it. Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 13 through 15. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. There is no doubt that this is a beautiful creature, as per the description given in the book of Ezekiel. If God mentions that this creature was in the garden, it logically follows that it might be the Nahash, the shining one, mentioned in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Many scholars have long debated the identity of this figure in Ezekiel. Some suggest it's a reference to the historical king of Tyre, while others contend it represents a broader figure, often identified as Satan or Lucifer. An earthly king wouldn't realistically be able to claim that they were in Eden, serve as the anointed cherub who covers, or reside on the holy mountain of God. Thus, many scholars who study the Bible propose that Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 11 through 19, serves as a dual prophecy, drawing parallels between the arrogance of the king of Tyre and the vanity and pride exhibited by Satan. The passage in Ezekiel paints a picture of a figure who was in Eden, was adorned with jewels, walked among the fiery stones, was blameless from creation until iniquity was found within, and was cast down as a profane thing. Comparing this passage with the interpretation of the Nahash as the shining one, there could be a correlation between the two entities. Both are described as radiant or shining. Both are associated with wisdom, albeit deceptive or corrupted, and both are present in the garden, playing roles in the disruption of paradise. This link provides a fascinating cross-textual perspective that adds depth to our understanding of these characters. It hints at a more profound, more complicated entity than a simple serpent. The Shining One, as per this interpretation, then represents a luminous, angelic figure who is somehow twisted into becoming a source of deception and sin. Proponents of the Shining One interpretation argue that the one textual evidence. This interpretation is based on the Hebrew root letters of Nahash, which can indeed mean to shine or be related to bronze or brass. This gives the interpretation a linguistic basis. 2. Cross-textual analysis. Linking the Shining One with the figure in Ezekiel 28 adds a rich cross-textual dimension to the interpretation. The similarities between the two figures provide a broader narrative arc that spans multiple books of the Bible. 3. Alignment with later traditions. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Arguments against the Shining One interpretation goes as follows. 1. Literal reading. The simplest reading of Nahash is as a literal serpent. The Shining One interpretation, while linguistically possible, might be seen as overcomplicating the narrative. 2. Varied interpretations of Ezekiel chapter 28. The figure in Ezekiel 28 is often interpreted as a lament for the historical king of Tyre or as a metaphorical figure representing human pride and arrogance, rather than a literal fallen angel or divine being. Interpretation 2. A standard serpent. Interpreting Nahash in the most literal sense, it signifies an actual serpent or snake. This creature is depicted as crafty and deceitful, playing a crucial role in the fall of Adam and Eve. Here, the serpent symbolizes cunning and temptation, leading the first humans astray from God's command. A noteworthy aspect of the Genesis narrative is that it seems to suggest the serpent had a form that was more similar to other animals before being cursed. The Bible does not directly indicate whether the serpent stood upright or walked before the curse. Yet it is feasible that the creature moved about on 4 legs, akin to other reptiles. This notion aligns well with the phrasing of Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, where God condemns the serpent. The text states, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life." This curse suggests a transformation. If the serpent already slithered on its belly, the curse would be redundant. Instead, the serpent's comparison to other creatures with legs suggests a transformation from a form with legs to one without. This interpretation, while literal, does not portray the serpent as a supernatural entity in its own right. Instead, it implies that Satan somehow took control or entered the body of the serpent to manipulate Adam and Eve. Therefore, the figure behind the serpent is Satan himself. The serpent served merely as the tool or vessel used by the devil to carry out his plan. This interpretation concludes that the tempter was the devil, using the form of a serpent as a disguise. The Bible does contain instances of spirit beings using animals or taking their form. A notable example is found in the story of Balaam in Numbers chapter 22, verses 21 through 35. In this narrative, Balaam's donkey is given the ability to speak, to rebuke Balaam when he doesn't see the angel of the Lord blocking their path. This incident illustrates a situation where a divine entity directly interferes with the natural abilities of an animal. While not identical, it is a somewhat parallel situation and offers a biblical precedent for interpreting the serpent in Genesis chapter 3 as a tool of a spiritual being, in this case, Satan. Proponents of this interpretation argue that 1. Textual simplicity. This interpretation doesn't require reading between the lines or inferring deeper meanings. The text straightforwardly depicts the serpent as a real animal that was used as a tool by Satan. 2. Consistent with other biblical themes. The Bible often depicts Satan as a deceptive figure who leads people into sin. This interpretation aligns with those themes. 3. Precedent for supernatural interference. The interpretation draws on other biblical examples, like the story of Balaam's donkey, which showcase supernatural beings influencing animals. Those who argue against this literal interpretation state, 1. Lack of direct evidence. The Bible doesn't explicitly state that Satan entered the serpent. This part of the interpretation is inferred and not directly supported by the text. 2. Doesn't fully address serpent's punishment. If Satan merely used the serpent, it could be argued that the punishment of the serpent to crawl on its belly is harsh and unwarranted. The interpretation doesn't fully resolve this moral question. Each interpretation brings its strengths and weaknesses. There are many more interpretations regarding the serpent in the garden. Today we have only outlined. Out of the 2 interpretations outlined, which one do you prescribe to?